Hey guys, DM Scotty here. Welcome to DM's Craft. I'm glad to have you with me. I've before on other videos, I've kind of shown the results of my crafting, and I've talked a little bit about how I use it. But I thought it might be interesting to have a vid where I show a tile and explain how I actually ran the encounter with the tile. So I thought it might be helpful to people to see that. This was kind of an unusual tile. And I thought it was an interesting little battle and encounter, and I thought it had a few things that might help some people when they're thinking about how to construct tiles and how to run the tile and that kind of thing. So let's go to the table and I'll show you that now. So here's my first tile, and I'm going to do a little bit of setup. This was in a crypt. And the characters had come in and they had fought some stuff in the first room. And I had three ways to go. One way was straight ahead, which had like a stone door. And then there were two other ways that went off the main entry hall that were leading down to sewers. And this is one of them. So what this is I've got a channel of sludge coming down the center here. So basically how I did this is I made a tile and I put two pieces of cardstock on each side and then added some texture with the glue gun and then added some gloss to it. But you can see some of the sludge is coming off the side and going into the channel. So it's a pretty slippery thing. Also something that you can't really show with the tiles is that this is actually a 30-degree incline, so it's kind of like this. So not only do you have to worry about sliding down, falling into the channel and maybe sliding down the slime-covered channel, but you know, just falling down. So you kind of set up some stuff there. So if they ran off the main tile and ended up going in this tile before the battle was over, they might have slipped. But they realized that if they just took it easy, as a DM, I basically didn't have them make any rolls. If they just said they were going slow and careful, I just let them go down. So something like this, there's actually no encounters in this section. This is just leading to another encounter. So generally, what I do is I have the characters set up, you know, basically their marching order, and they're basically on both sides of this sludge recess that's in the section, and it's a few feet lower. This part's like a few feet lower than these ledges, so they're kind of skirting along the ledges, being careful to try not to slide. And so something like this, you don't have to actually just measure movement every turn until they get to the end, because basically the important part is when they get to the end. So I'll just explain what happens, and then since there's no encounters, what I would do is we would just move everybody up. So like I said, instead of counting and then everybody moving, if there was an encounter or something that was happening, you know, you could have someone move. Someone said they were going to scout or move first, you could have them get attacked. But generally on a tile where you're not having any encounters or anything that's dangerous, just have them explain what they're doing and then move to the next section. So now I'm going to set up the next tile, and I'll show you how that worked out. The players move carefully down to the entrance, and what they see is it looks like some kind of old cistern with some brackish water in it. Can't see into the water. There's a small walkway going all the way around the room. It looks like to another like a drain exit. So basically, the part that comes down the center of the tile empties below the walkway into the cistern. So there's like a little. So if a character fell into that and slid down, they could actually try to catch themselves before they went in. It doesn't spill up over the walkway. So the tile itself, I just made. There's a bottom piece of the tile. Then I have the walkway sections cut out, and they're on top of that. And I made two wall sections on top of each other so it would look so that the walls would pop up enough to be distinct from the walkway. So the characters look at it, and I explain that the walkway looks pretty crumbly. As you can see, I put some rubble and some distressing. I've got cracks in it, so they got visual cues that could be a dangerous area. But it seems a better option than going into the water. So they poke and prod a little bit, and it seems fairly stable. Some pebbles fall off, and a little bit of rock tumbles into the brackish water, stagnant water plops in there. So, but they feel that it's safe enough. Now, game-wise, there's a section that's going to collapse. So here, this section will collapse, okay, and they don't know that. So what I've done is I've made a separate piece to go here, and I'll show you that when we get to it. So basically, I kind of hinted to the players that if they go too fast around this walkway, that it might collapse. Okay, their judgment feels that it would probably collapse. Okay, you could do dungeon checks to see that it's probably okay. I wouldn't do anything as far as dungeoneering until they got closer to this part, to avoid that. So it's a combination between a trap and a hazard. It's just a collapsing part of the walkway. So also when I did this mission, I told you I had 3 different ways: the 2 sewer ways and 1 way that went straight through the dungeon itself. Now what I had was the door. There were 3 ways they could basically get in. If they couldn't get through the door, which they didn't end up getting through the door, they could go through one of the other ways and get in. So here they could come around and try to pry these bars loose. And if they failed their rolls on the first one. If they fail their roll on this one, then it's basically too strong for them and they can't get through. They actually failed their roll for this one they played. So they had to go all the way back to the other one, which was fun because they had to go through more of the dungeon, but basically what it boiled down to were there were 3 entrances to get in, and if they failed the first 2, they'd basically automatically make the third, because if they don't make it, then they can't go any further. So I just made it a little more interesting by they had to try to get through, and if they couldn't, the last one would automatically get through. Like the last one I just said was very rusted, and no matter what they rolled, it basically came apart. So I did it that way. So you don't want your players to be stopped where they can't go further. So that's how I handled that. But anyway, so they decide to go out on the ledge, and the warrior takes the lead, and he's just moving a couple inches, and then they all start coming out. So, but as they come out, little rocks are falling off the ledge, and the ledge is crumbling a little more, but it still seems fairly sturdy. They notice that there's something moving in the water. And that's nice because they can't see what it is. They know there's something in there, but they can't see what it is. The edge is crumbling, so they're worried that the ledge could collapse and they could go in there with whatever's in the water. So that's a nice sense of dread building that up. Because they know those 2 things are happening, and it kind of builds dread in the players. So, instead of just plopping the monster on there and saying, oh, here, this thing attacks you, there's a sense of dread because they don't know what it is, and it's in this brackish water that they can't see, and if they fall in, they're going to be at a disadvantage. So you've got a nice sense of dread going on, and that really helps add atmosphere to the game. So the players decide they're going to stick together as opposed to staying back. So they move around slowly. They stay within a couple of inches of each other. And so everything seems to be going fine. When they get enough into the room, then the creatures start leaping out of the water and trying to attack them. So what I had these crypt worms, and see if I can show you this here. Here's what they look like. And I painted them real slimy to match the slime in the pit. So they would basically essentially like leap out and attack a player. Now, one thing that I had interesting about this was the creature would leap out and attack, and then it would dive back into the water. So the players couldn't really counterattack it. So basically they would have to hold their action if they wanted to attack when it leapt out, when another one would leap out of the water. So that was fun and challenging for the players. Then when they got here, they were worried about the fight, so they didn't notice the possible collapse. But also, what you could do is when the worms leap out, they're fairly large. What I did was they had to make a athletics or acrobatics check not to fall into the pool. So now what I did was, when the character reached that, they were busy worried about the combat and didn't notice it. So what I did was I just made a little cardstock template, and I made it the color to match the water, the brackish water in the pit, and then I made a little bit of rubble. Made a little bit of rubble on the edges for the edge of the collapse. So let me move so when he hit this, it collapsed. And let me show you there. So then that's an easy way to mark on a tile, like when something like this happens. That way the players don't know that something's up. If you make pieces that come out or whatever, like anything like that, the player might guess that something's up. So if you just make a piece you can just lay on the tile like that, they may not guess that something's up. So the warrior ends up making his the trap doesn't hit him, so he ends up jumping back and not falling in. So they end up using some rope and getting across. So the worms keep jumping out, but the mage figures out that the worms don't like the electricity, so he ends up casting a storm pillar to try to hold them off, while the warrior moves over and does a strength check on the bars, which he utterly fails, so he's not able to get it. And basically, I was only going to have one check. Like, if they don't make the check the first time, that's it. They fail. They fail the check. So the bars are too strong to bend. So essentially, they have to go back now. So basically, what happens is the mage tries to corral the worms away from the party. So as he moves, he uses a storm pillar. He keeps setting it up, sustaining it, and interposing it between the party and the worms. So when the other players get back, they're not getting hurt by the worms when they're close enough, because the storm pillar is basically blocking the worms from getting up to them. I don't have the storm pillar with me, but my player character has the storm pillar. But basically, it's a model we have that's a storm pillar, and he was moving it. He was, as a minor action, he was moving it around, and so basically they just skirted back around the pit and moved the storm pillar as they went, and were able to dodge the worms. So that's a nice way. Also, you can do an encounter where you don't have to kill everything in an encounter. A lot of players have talked about the combat out, or a lot of DMs, especially Sly Flourish, have talked about the combat out. But that's not really even a combat out. This is more like just using tactics and common sense to maneuver. So the characters, you should always have that kind of interesting stuff. You don't have to always, but you should a lot of times have that kind of interesting stuff in your counters, where the players can get some advantage or fend off a certain enemy or that kind of thing by figuring out something about the enemy. And so that's kind of a nice little thing to add to encounters, and it made it more interesting. Made the player feel like he was doing something really cool by not just them all having to fight it, but he was able to hold off I had 3 worms. He was able to hold off all 3 worms from the pit here with his storm pillar. So that was fun. Now I also had, if they would have bent the bars on this, I had another canal that led away from the tile, and then they could have moved on to that tile. But as it turned out, they had to go back and go through another sewer part. So that was fun for me because I got to see the whole dungeon. But I wanted to show you this encounter. Some of the cool things you can do with tiles. Also, with this kind of stuff, like adding something to the tile, so that this section collapsed into the brackish water, the muck, and this was the 2 edges, and that way I didn't give it away to my players. I didn't have something on the tile that gave it away, or I didn't have something I would remove. So really, when you construct tiles, think about that kind of thing, because you don't want to necessarily give it away to the players. Excuse me. You want them to encounter it without necessarily certain clues. The clue enough was that this ledge was crumbling. So that was already a clue. If I would have put a piece that would have come out here, then they totally would have guessed that's where the trap is. So you want to avoid that at all costs when you're crafting your own hazards or traps or anything like that. Unless it's a trap they see, and then part of the encounter is trying to disarm it. So here you go. I thought it'd be fun to show this encounter. If you like this, kind of thing, let me know, and I'll show some more things that I've done to kind of give you ideas what you can do with the tiles and how to play on them and everything. So this is DM Scotty signing off, and I'll see you next time.